Great. Bernadette, it seems like very loud. I don't know why. Bernadette, I have a question. It seems like, oh, okay.
I think it might be because Bernadette is not on mute and she's coordinating multiple sessions at the same time.
Okay.
Then should I able to mute her?
Mute her.
As a host?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it working now? Okay, great. Thank you. Right. Thank you for joining this session. The best paper nature of work. As we have 3 papers to present today, so we have more slacks. So I want each presenter to spend 10 to 15 minutes for remarks, and we'll have Q&As or discussion right after that. We can also do that at the end of session, if time allows. As we can have a chat room, please feel free to ask questions so I can relay them to the presenters during the discussions. So without further ado, let's get started. So first presenter is Yehi Go, a doctoral candidate in the Management and Human Resources Department at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The title is Unpacking the Challenges and Opportunities of Personal Specializations. Okay.
Thank you, Hyesook. Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just gonna change it to the presentation mode. And you see the full screen, right? Not the small thing. Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Yehi Ko. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I'm very excited to share my work on specialization in knowledge-intensive organizations. Professionals have increased over the last 2 decades, now representing almost 25% of the US workforce in 2020. And these professionals or knowledge workers in general are those who have accumulated deep knowledge in a particular domain and therefore hold an expertise that allows them to complete tasks more quickly and often more successfully than other non-expert individuals. So they are crucial for knowledge-intensive organizations that typically create value by acquiring, utilizing, and retaining valuable knowledge. For this reason, organizations are often interested in growing their employees into greater experts by having their employees focus on a small particular field that is increasing the level of specialization so that employees can master that particular domain more quickly. From the organizational standpoint is how much specialization actually helps acquire and retain knowledge at the collective level and under what conditions. Before I answer these questions, I first try to, I'll more formally define the key construct that I'm using throughout this presentation, which is personal specialization. Following the Victor Thompson's work, I define personal specialization as a division of subject domain into different subfields of expertise. For instance, a brokerage house may have 3 security analysts following 3 different industries, such as healthcare, IT, and semiconductors, each achieving overall high personal specialization at the organizational level. While another firm may have all of them working at the same 3 industries together, in which case the organization would have low personal specialization. So personal specialization is essentially about how much individuals within the organization focus on the same versus different domains. And this way, it is an interpersonal or a collective level construct and is different from distinguishing just at the individual level whether that particular employee is a specialist or generalist. It has more organizational implications. And there have not been a lot of empirical papers on the specialization's effect, especially given how the concept itself, how long that concept has been with us. And even with those empirical papers, they found mixed results on the specialization's effect. Specialization is known to increase the learning efficiency and economies of scale, but is also found to incur coordination costs that can be costly for the organization. In the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which I'm investigating as an empirical context for this paper, employees also showed some mixed reactions to specialization, as some associated it with communication challenges. For instance, one examiner commented that there's this one person who has been around for 20 years, and people always ask him first. And our supervisor tells people to go ask this person, and because that person will know better than I. And according to this view, specialization would deter knowledge exchange and therefore might incur more costs for that can be detrimental for the unit performance. On the other hand, another examiner saw more strengths in specialization, as commented by, if you are focused on a specific thing, then it might be easier to look at the new stuff. So there are some potential benefits, especially the learning efficiency that are resulting from specialization. So based on these different perspectives, I present a competing hypothesis on the relationship between personal specialization and unit performance, saying that it could either be positive or negative, and it's more an empirical question. In this paper, I especially focus on employee turnover as an important contingency factor to understand this relationship better. And according to prior turnover research, turnover costs are largely a function of what is lost, that is, how much human or social capital is lost due to turnover, and whether or how much can be recovered after the loss. Based on this framework, I argued that any performance gains from personal specialization, the learning efficiency, and the economies of scale are likely to be disrupted from turnover. This is because personal specialization is essentially resulting in more individualized knowledge expertise within the organization. And while making each individual become an expert of their own domain should generate some productivity gains in stable periods, this very lack of knowledge overlap among employees may backfire when someone leaves the organization. It will be very challenging for the remaining employees to fill in a leaver's position as they are non-experts to that particular technology domain. So I predict that the relationship between personal specialization and unit performance will be more negative when employees leave the organization. To test these predictions, I use information on art units of patent examiners at the United States Patent and Trademark Office that examines patent applications. And there are art units within the organization, which are essentially an administrative groups of examiners who are responsible for reviewing similar technologies of applications. So when patent applications are first received by the USPTO, they are routed to the art unit of responsible technologies and then distributed across examiners largely in a random manner within that unit. And based on this work, because of this nature of work, the USPTO provides a very nice empirical setting for my research purposes because I can track each individual's accumulation of expertise over time and also measure the unit level personal specialization in terms of whether examiners have similar technological expertise or not within that group. I collected data from the USPTO pair data research database and internal records from the USPTO directly through a few FOIA requests I made between 2018 and 2020. I also tried to complement the data by interviewing some patent examiners and ex-patent examiners. To measure personal specialization, I modified a Jaffe's 1986 measure. And as I mentioned briefly, each patent application that examiners review is associated with a particular technology, the representative technology based on the USPC technology classification system. And based on this examiner's work history in the previous 1 year, I created an expertise portfolio of each examiner and compared the degree of divergence in this expertise portfolio of any 2 pairs of the examiners that are affiliated in the same art unit. Averaging this pair level expertise divergence at the unit produced the value of personal specialization at the unit. So in my sample, there are roughly 116,000 panel observations of 665 art units and 363 pay periods. I used the most granular time interval available from the data, which is a biweekly pay period. To measure unit performance, I look at office sections and first office sections. Office section is what patent examiners write to applicants like this one in the slide. So it includes basically their decisions on the underlying invention, whether they're going to grant a patent or not, and also the prior literature references that they use in making those decisions. And among different types of office sections, the first office section is considered more important and time consuming as examiners need to go through the whole application for the first time. Based on this information, examiners are evaluated based on biweekly and monthly and quarterly period. Turnover is measured using the ratio of leavers to the total number of examiners affiliated in the art unit. And in my sample, most of the art units experienced at least 1 turnover event. So here are the main results. If we look at the fixed effects model here, 1 standard deviation increase in personal specialization, which is about 0.271 in my sample, is associated with about 2.24 more of office sections and 1.54 more first office sections. And these translate into about 2 to 3% increase in overall performance. We also see that such that turnover rate mitigates this personal specialization gain, as 1 standard deviation increase in turnover rate results in 8.5% reduction of the personal specialization gain in office section-based performance and 6.7% reduction in first office section-based performance. Graphically, we can also see that the slope of the relationship between personal specialization and performance changes according to the baseline turnover rate. Oops, sorry. The next slide, to better understand what's actually going under during this turnover period, I also limited the sample to art units that experienced turnover with 1 year and divided their units' performance into 2 categories based on the lever's technology. So the performance in technology that the lever was mainly responsible for, and the performance in the rest of the technologies. I found that personal specialization indeed has a disruptive effect on the former type of performance, that is the performance in technologies that the lever mainly took care of when they were at the organization, but has a positive effect on performance in other technologies. So to sum up from this work, I wanted to understand better how personal specialization affects unit performance from the organizational standpoint, from the human resource management standpoint, with a particular focus on employee turnover. Ultimately, this as to why it may help in certain occasions to know each other's work, even there is some performance gains associated with specialization, especially when the team membership changes frequently within the organization. And more broadly, this also connects to other questions of how the reduced interactions among employees, the fact that employees are becoming perhaps less interdependent on each other due to the pandemic, may affect the institutional knowledge at the collective level. Last, I believe the personal specialization measure that are adopted in this paper can be utilized in other settings where professionals' work can be observed using the actual jobs that they have accomplished over time. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation and open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. Is there any questions or feedback you'd like to do for Ye's presentation? I actually have a quick question. So I know you didn't like hypothesize directly, but I'm just curious about the relationship between specialization and employee turnover.
Right. So I have not checked the correlation yet, but I would guess that there might be a negative correlation between specialization and turnover, just because employees become perhaps more productive in the work that they do. But I do have to check that correlation because I don't have that top of my head.
All right, thank you. And also, you're assuming that specialization is mainly driven by employers, so managers, because the way the task is allocated is mainly driven by employers. Because I think, depending on who actually wants to do their work, generalization or specialization, I think it can also affect, the relationships. I'm just curious about that.
Right. So theoretically, I believe that they are governed by the manager. They would adopt a particular strategy in assigning the work, which would result in a particular level of specialization. In the empirical context of the USPTO, however, to try to in trying to parse out any like manager or other factor related that might affect unit performance. Which is one of the reasons why I looked at this data set, because the manager is more or less randomly assigning these applications to the examiners. So the main reason that art units have different personal specialization is because the way that art units are set up. Some art units have multiple examiners that are working on similar domains, as opposed to some other units are more focused art units. So to answer your question, I guess theoretically, yes, but empirically, it's not in this paper, which is part of the reason that I am using to look at that effect that is independent from other manager or other induced effects on unit performance.
Yeah. Any other questions? Right. Then now, I don't know why, for some reasons, my camera is turning on and off. Sorry about that. So now I turn things over to the second presenter, Bulin Zhang, and co-authors Helen. Bulin Zhang is a PhD candidate in the industrial relations and human resources at the School of Management and Labor Relations, Rutgers University.
Okay, thank you, Hyesook. I'm going to share
Sure.
my screen. Okay. So are you able to see the screen, not the presenter view, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Hello, everyone. My name is Bulin. I'm a PhD candidate from Rutgers University. Today I'm going to present a really initial product of our research, and I'm working on this project with my advisor Helen, which is she's an associate professor from Rutgers University as well. We kind of changed the title a little bit to make it easier for you to get an understanding of our research. So this may be a little different from what is showing in the LERA program, but it's basically we change it a little bit to make it easier to capture the theme of our presentation. So so first of all, I like the historical development that adopt automation to reduce work costs. So the advancements in AI have actually expanded the capabilities of organizations. by allowing the leverage of big data with machine learning to automate or semi-automate work predictions. So one typical representative of such technical advances is a ride-hailing platform. So in contrast to the traditional taxi services, platform has improved taxi services through a dynamic process. So for example, first of all, I like looking for the customers on the street. So platform actually assigns customers to drivers through a matching process. Thereby, it helps reduce the search costs for both sides. And secondly, the operations of platform have made the service price no longer predetermined because they have a purpose to better adjust the supply and demand instantly to promote their service. And thirdly, platform has also created a loose work relationship. And this has actually promoted a phenomenon of multi-homing in which the drivers form ties with multiple platforms at the same time. So these changes brought by the platform have great implications for our thinking of the work, as well as for the multiple parties that are involved in these changes. For example, the role of human judgment in work processes have been challenged in such an environment because it's a platform making some decision-making or semi-automated decision-making. So among this, we think that one notable implication is about the complexity and instability that has been brought by the platform into driver's work. So because the platform is leveraging big data, so it's unlike the traditional technologies, it has caused some complexity and instability into driver's work, and thereby causing uncertainties for drivers in various aspects. And we think such uncertainties are worth exploring because, so first of all, so the algorithm is consistently rewriting itself as they learn and solve problems happen in a given environment. But what do drivers care about in such a dynamic working environment that may impact their attitudes and behaviors during their job is not quite clear yet. And secondly, the drivers generally lack the ability to handle the enormous amount of data that is processed by the algorithm to obtain a sufficient understanding of this technology. So how they manage and experience such not easily manageable uncertainties also becomes important if researchers want to further their understanding of drivers' work-related outcomes. So to identify the nature of their experience uncertainties from the ride-hailing driver's perspective, so this study would like to explore what they care and how they experience uncertainties in such a dynamic working environment created and managed by the platform algorithm. And by doing so, this study intends to make a few contributions. So first of all, we want to enrich the understanding of natures of uncertainties from the ride-hailing driver's perspective. And also, unlike the traditional employees, so the platform drivers have only limited social contact with other drivers to discuss their uncertainties. And as a result, the online forum has been identified as a major channel through which they get connected with each other and seek support. However, we saw some previous studies, and some of the studies have relied upon human subjectivity in coding the online forum contents. So there is actually a concern for that because there will be a challenge in assuring the independence of the final results. And also there's a limitation of identifying all important themes from textual data because it's sometimes difficult for the human readers to discern all of them. So in consideration of these concerns, so this study makes a relative contribution by adopting an objective method of text mining with a purpose to, to gain a complete view of uncertainties from the driver's perspective. So to explore these major topics, so this study uses the advice forum from the uberpeople.net website, which is identified by various scholars as a well-known forum used by drivers to share information, thoughts, and feelings as a source of data collection. So through using Python, we gathered a total of around 6,000 posts that are posted by these drivers before November 27, 2020. So in order to save some time, I'm going to skip this part of method, but we followed the scholar's recommendation to pre-process the text data and also get it ready for topic modeling. So we used the fine-tuning method to ask Python to give us the best parameter for the number of topics, and the fine-tuning results suggest that there are 6 major topics underlying these 6,000 posts, and its associated top 10 words has been identified as well. So according to the results, so the first major topics we found include the keywords such as ride, time, and trip. So these keywords indicate that drivers are experiencing uncertainties related to their working time, ride, or trips. So for example, they are discussing uncertainties regarding how to get started and how to handle circumstances happen in a trip, such as finding a ride or confirming a customer's arrival. So we provided some representative posts from the advice forum here for your reference. And besides, it's in this part. So besides the trips, drivers are also experiencing uncertainties related to their driving time, such as handling the time spent on waiting for passengers. And other drive-related stuff has also been discussed under topic 1 as well, which include acceptance rate or scheduled pickups. So as you can see here, because in such a working environment, it's a platform rather than drivers that analyze data to determine the job orders, it becomes uncertain for drivers to identify the nature of their tasks, such as working standards or where, when, and how long the next trip will be. So I like the traditional jobs in which workers have clear understanding of their job demands, expectations, or responsibilities. So these drivers have experienced uncertainties, or I can say like some kind of unique uncertainties about the nature of the ride-hailing work. And the second topic has keywords such as seat, clean smell, and passenger. So this one is about providing service as well as interacting with passengers. So drivers are sharing their inquiries about creating a good service environment, such as how to keep the car clean. And besides, they are also talking about their interactions with passengers. And these discussions include like dealing with some unexpected requests or interactions with passengers. And there are some examples showing here in this table as well. So the second theme has reflected drivers' experience uncertainties related to the customer service. So although I think this kind of uncertainty is likely to be experienced by traditional workers, platform has actually intensified it because customers are now serving as agents of the management. So whose preferences are now dictate how work should be performed, and thereby introducing a major source of uncertainty into drivers' work. So topic 3 has been identified with keywords such as make, pay, work, and money. So the group of these words suggests that a major uncertainty is about payment. So some discussions under topic 3 include such as inquiries about how much drivers can earn or how to maximize income. And again, I like the traditional workers in which people have some understanding of their earnings. So the lack of price-related information is kind of unique to these drivers because on the one hand, the platform's sophisticated operation has prevented the price to be stable. So it's hard for them to get a clear understanding of the price information. And on the other hand, so the platform organization has leveraged the sophisticated operation of algorithm to prevent drivers from understanding such price information because they want to conceal how it extracts the plus value and it constrains drivers' resistance of control. And because of it, they have faced a major uncertainty of price-related information. And moving to topic 4, the results indicate that there are keywords of account, email, support, and app. So the conjunction of these words suggests that drivers are experiencing uncertainties related to their account and the platform organization support. So some issues include uploading the documents or addressing some lack of response from the Uber regarding certain claims or account issues. So again, compared to traditional workplaces, this type of uncertainty is it's notable here because algorithm generally lacks the human factor and thereby resulting in some co-technical treatment regardless of the unique circumstance. So the next theme is about has keywords of background, ticket, check, disability, and speed. So the occurrence of these words indicate that this topic is related to driving related legal policy, which include inquiries related to things such as background check, disability, or speed. And the last topic has been identified with keywords such as animal, filter, service, and input. So the group of these words are a little difficult to interpret when we take a first look, but after a further reading of the posts that are grouped under topic 6, we found that this is more about some uncommon issues or drivers' personalized opinions. So for example, one host shared about his or her car rules, and another posted a news and suggests drivers to be careful when buying cars from strangers. So we think that this topic is more about some uncommon or personalized issues faced by drivers, and thus reflect some peripheral work uncertainties. So again, although both these topics, topic 5 and 6, are likely to be experienced by traditional workers, platform has intensified it due to its creation of lack of social support and its loose work contract. So besides identification of the main topic, we also explore the frequencies to which each topic has been discussed. And the results indicate that the most common uncertainties are associated with topic 1, topic 3, and topic 4, which are related to discussions of the nature of work as a platform driver and discussion related to the account or Uber support and discussion related to payment. So we use topic modeling procedure and provided a more objective view of nature of uncertainties from the driver's perspective. And we found that drivers have used this online forum to discuss for various things, and usually for things related to their job, their app account, and payment. However, this study is not without limitations. So first of all, we are not able to examine the impacts of drivers' experience uncertainty on relevant work outcomes. And we also, we just mainly focused on the identification of major topics without a consideration of time or locations. And also there is potential of human subjectivity in terms of interpretation of the topics. But as I said at the beginning, this is we are still at a very initial stage of our study, and we are planning to adopt some more advanced topic models to link the identified topic with other information for our next steps. So for example, we are considering exploring the differences of topics discussed by drivers before, during, or after the pandemic, or link the topics with drivers' gender to say if like male and female experience types of uncertainty different. So at the end, we thank you very much for everyone listening our presentation, and we would very much appreciate your suggestions, feedbacks, or recommendations for our study's next steps.
Excellent, thank you. I'm always too pleased to see this kind of, qualitative approach. I'm not that familiar with the text mining, but I'm sure this is very kind of time consuming. It's great work. I'm just curious if you have any questions or suggestions. Bulin's presentation.
I have a question. So is this online platform something that the management team also is looking at or attending to in trying to improve their program?
I'm sorry, I just lost the internet connection for a second. Would you mind like repeating this question?
Yeah, of course. I was just wondering if the issues that were discussed in this online platform were also something that would also be like feedback that the management team is looking for, and would that affect how they improve the system?
I wasn't really 100% sure if the managers from the platform organization are also looking at the platform, but I assume that they want to hear from the driver's perspective and are looking for information from this online forum. So this online forum is actually created by initiated by I think I remember it's initiated by some driver because they felt they are working in a rather isolated environment and they cannot get connected with each other to share information. So they think they need such a channel to be able to share information, and like if some drivers have good practices, they can share such good practices with each other. So then this forum has been established and expanded quickly because they thought this is a good place for them to share information with each other, but it's not initiated by the platform organization. But I assume that they are also very interested in learning because that's a major channel through which they can also hear from the drivers what they are thinking, what they are facing, and then probably use that information to improve their systems. But that's a really good question. Thank you.
And if I may add on that, I think this is an excellent point because as of now, actually, we do not have a time element in the analysis. But based on the question, actually, if we cannot rule out the possibility that managers or Uber actually is trying to get the advice or this change among workers to improve their processes, then we may be able to add a time element to see how, or we can see whether things change or the focus of advice seeking change over time. And probably that will also help to address whether the algorithm improve or change itself over time. Great question.
Well,
Great question.
I have a question that's similar, but with a different focus. If management can look at these online forum, wouldn't that discourage drivers from being candid about critiques that they might have of the companies and their policies?
If I may take this one, first, it's anonymous. So actually, it's really difficult to identify the particular driver among the large population of Uber drivers. And secondly, actually, the idea of managers in Uber or managers who supervise Uber drivers, it's a very unique category because they don't really have a direct supervisor. Many of these are part-time gig workers. They somehow are connected to Uber through the app. They probably haven't met anybody from Uber who have any supervision or managerial responsibility over them.
I would think the Uber management would be very interested in tracking those comments, both favorable and unfavorable.
You know, actually, you make an excellent point. Above and beyond the study that Bulin is addressing here, we have another parallel study ongoing in China. Somehow it's related to Mark's paper, at least on the name as well. So in the study that we conducted in China, it's a group of app-based workers, drivers. But in China, actually, those companies hired them as employees rather than as gig workers. So we are considering to include this idea of how workers feel that they are deprived of decision making and judgment, and they are being watched, monitored every single second or minute into the study. But it's in our study, actually, it's a relatively early stage. And we are also confounded actually by the fact that this is a group of what we call the app-based workers. They are not guaranteed with much. They are not guaranteed very much in terms of job security, but they are granted as employee status in China. So this is some area that we will have to think more, and we will also like to hear from others as well. That is a separate study.
Yeah, I can see Andrew's comments. Do you want to add more on this? Andrew commented, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I study these drivers as well, and because these forums are public, when they want to organize or whatever, they use private Facebook groups or more commonly WhatsApp groups. In my experience.
This is a wonderful, wonderful point. So if we think about the research design of this study, and to which extent our findings are affected, or our findings are shaped by the research design, is we are using secondary data available on published forum. So somehow we are also considering in terms of we are trying to understand the data source as well. Like when people have those information posted in a public forum, what those information really represent, and what the data that we are able to extract are biased toward. So I think you make a great point in terms of, well, probably we are less likely to see very sensitive information here, and we don't see intimate information as well. So yeah, it's a excellent point. I don't think that we are ready to answer this question yet, but we are aware of the fact that by using secondary data, actually we really have to understand what that is and what limitations our findings will be constrained by.
It's great discussion. Thank you. So I think we can move on to the next presentation. Our last speaker is Mark Erlich, a fellow at Harvard Labor and Work-Life Program and retired executive secretary treasurers of the New England Regional Council of Carpenter. Okay, floor is yours.
Okay, let me get the slideshow up.
Yes, take your time.
There we go. Well, I'm not quite sure why this doesn't want. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, for some reason I'm having trouble getting it into slideshow mode, but I think I'll just go ahead with it as is. Okay. Anyway, as Hyesook said, I am Mark Erlich. I am a carpenter by trade. Was the head of the New England 19,000 member New England Council of Carpenters for many years. Retired in 2017 and have been a fellow with the Harvard Labor and Work-Life Program since then, focusing primarily on the issue of misclassification, payroll fraud, and the underground economy. So this paper is on, and it's something that has been in Industrial Labor Relations Review recently. This talks about the issue of misclassification, which is obviously a subject of enormous interest these days because of the current debate focused on the gig economy and the changing nature of work. But the truth is that misclassification, that is calling people who function as employees but labeling them independent contractors as a business model, is not new and is not restricted to the gig economy, but has been around construction for decades, and is part of the larger social and economic changes that we saw in the breakdown of formalized labor relations in the 1980s, and the fissuring in an industry like other industries, but in construction, there was already a tradition of subcontracting. So the fissuring that happened there was an extension of existing condition. So what makes construction particularly susceptible to this issue? There are genuine independent contractors who work in the industry, people who work on their own. And so having that category of legitimate independent contractors is something that allows for the misuse of it for people who are not functioning that way. There's a highly mobile and flexible workforce. It's a turbulent industry, which is why I think in many ways it's the original gig economy. And also what happened is the construction recessions, it's a boom and bust industry, and there's always a search for cost-cutting measures. Materials typically don't change costs from one competitor to another. So if you can save money on labor costs, that gives you a competitive advantage in a recession. And the classifying workers as independent contractors produces those labor savings of somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30%, because you're not paying your tax and insurance obligations. And in particular, construction workers' compensation insurance is because of the dangers of the industry, is a large cost factor. So what happened back in the late 60s? This was a period of time when the unions were very strong in the building trades, and there was a high degree of inflation, and costs were spiraling upward. And the largest companies in the country were upset about the inflationary costs, and in 1969 formed the Construction Users Anti-Inflation Roundtable. That was renamed in 1972 to a name that you are all more familiar with, which is the Business Roundtable, but it started life in an attempt to rein in the unions in construction. And they issued a series over the course of the 70s of booklets called More Construction for the Money, which was an attempt to reduce costs and limit union power. So one of the things that the Business Roundtable was concerned about was that they felt the loyalty of the general contractor was not to the owner, where it should be, but to the subcontractors and even the union, because they would, when you went from job to job, you use the same subs, the same union workers, but you shifted from one owner to another. So they wanted the contractor to be loyal to the owner, and that was done in the form of a shift from general contracting to construction management, where the construction manager worked for a fee rather than an estimated lump sum bid, thereby shedding risk for problematic estimates and responsibility for direct hires. In fact, from 67 to 97, the general contractors cut their share of direct construction worker employment from 35 to 24% of the labor force, whereas specialty subs portion increased from 48 to 63%. And there was a parallel legislative and political assault, which was an attempt to repeal federal Davis-Bacon, which never succeeded, but 9 states repealed their state prevailing wage laws, known as the mini Davis-Bacon, during the decade of the 80s, and 6 more have since then. Today, 24 states never had or now have no prevailing wage laws. And this is really comparable to the deregulation drive that happened in the 80s in trucking, airlines, and other industries. But the other thing was that in 1978, there was Section 530 of the Revenue Act was passed, which created a safe harbor, thus grandfathering any misclassification that may have happened, so the companies did not have to worry about IRS enforcement, which would have been, the single most significant and effective enforcement agency. Then the legal context, you had a combination of this increased subcontracting, you had Section 530. You also had the 1986 Immigration Reform Act, which resulted in a cottage industry of lawyers, accountants, and consultants who would go around the country advising contractors how to take their workforce on a Friday from being all employees to on Monday being all independent contractors. And they created independent contractor contracts to paper the reclassification, which ended up in many courts and legal jurisdictions being very effective, because judges would rule that the simple presence of this contract was dispositive in the sense that it overrode the fact that the workers were still functioning as employees. So, immigration was happening at the same time. Proportion of Latino workers in construction increased 4 times as fast as white workers from 1990 to 2000. By 2014, undocumented immigrants in particular made up 15% of the total national construction workforce, and that resulted in a shift from misclassification to cash compensation, because you had the emergence of labor brokers who were the intermediaries between the subcontractors and the workforce. My experience about sort of this invisibility of workers, in 2007, our union filed for an NLRB election with a company called National Carpentry. They were the largest non-union wood framing contractor in the region. And the owner's response was that he never employed any employees, despite the fact that they had dozens of projects with hundreds of workers who were all carpenters. He said that they were not employees, and that the NLRB office investigated and concluded that the fact that the employer may have exercised supervisory authority, may have paid employees directly, participated in their hiring, set their initial wage rates, provided them with tools, does not, however, provide conclusive evidence that it was the employer alone who employed them. So you had this legal infrastructure that was completely looking the other way at the fact that people were clearly functioning as employees, but were being legally classified as independent contractors. The owner then told the board that the real employers were a group of 14 subcontractors. And when the board sent subpoenas to the address of those subcontractors, all were returned undeliverable. So you literally had hundreds of workers who absolutely nobody claimed responsibility for. So what happened in this decades worth of transformation in the industry? Well, the number of unions, I did this in 2004. We engaged in a series of studies at the state level to establish the economic consequences of misclassification, essentially to show that this is not a union issue, but a public policy issue because of the losses of tax revenues to the states and federal government. And that allowed us to lobby legislatures for more effective laws and enforcement. All the talk about the ABC test that came with AB 5 and Prop 22 really started with construction. And in addition, there was the hiring of multilingual organizers, since most of this new workforce was either Spanish or Portuguese speaking, and more unions formed coalition with worker center, community organization, and immigrant advocacy groups. At the regulatory level, the ABC test became more common in construction. There were also interagency task forces because this was not only a wage and hour violation in the Department of Labor, but it affected Department of Unemployment Security, workers' comp, which in many states is all handled by multiple agencies. And there was this notion of co-enforcement of partnering with unions, worker centers, and high road employers. But there had to be a series of strategies developed when the focus was on misclassification, that is, people who were being called independent contractors but were actually employees. You actually had a paper trail that you could follow. Once the underground economy emerged with cash compensation, it became much more difficult for regulatory agencies to really crack down because these were unreported and unrecorded workers, well, whose income was unreported and unrecorded. At the DOL, at the federal level, during the Obama administration, when David Weil was the head of WHD, we are hoping he comes back in that capacity soon. There was a strategic enforcement model that was developed that David really developed about how to go after problematic industries, and strong opinion letters on independent contracting and joint employment. So what is the result of all of this been? I realize we are running late, so I'm sort of trying to rush through this. But the most recent national study that was done in 2020 shows that between 12 and 20% of the construction workforce is today either misclassified or paid off the books. And that represents 1.3 to 2.2 million workers, which is a huge, I mean, construction represents 5% of the GDP. It is a major industry, and there's a significant body of the workforce that is off the books or misclassified. The reason the numbers are so wide, the divergence, is because it's so difficult to measure, as I said, those who were paid in cash. It's easier to measure those who've been misclassified because of the audits that are done by state regulatory agencies, but it's very difficult to measure people whose income is unreported and unrecorded. So what do we have today? The industry, which had been in the 60s, late 60s, when the Business Roundtable began its mission to curb the power of the unions, has been their agenda has been essentially one. The mission was very effective. There are still union strongholds in the Northeast, on the West Coast, in the Midwest, major cities where union density is high, where union wages are good, where benefits are good, and safety conditions are strong. But if you go south of the Mason-Dixon line to the south, the Southwest, the Rocky Mountain states, most residential work and most work in rural communities, and certainly in blue states, is done on a non-union basis and is laced with problems of wage theft, unsafe conditions, and as an industry, the really degraded conditions, both in terms of compensation and safety. And the tragedy of all of this is that for many blue-collar workers, construction back in the day was mostly white men. Now it's increasingly diverse. has been historically in the union sector a pathway to the middle class for people who either could not afford to or did not want to go to college. That pathway to the middle class has been eliminated in huge swaths of the country. And today we have a bifurcated industry where the notion of opportunity has been limited, as I said, to major urban centers in the Northeast, West Coast, and Midwest. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have any questions or suggestions? I think read.
Yeah,
Oh.
read it to you.
Yeah.
I just I've seen, this may be kind of a niche question, but I've seen this thing popping up of social procurement with a lot of local governments as this way of, instead of doing this race to the bottom in terms of costs, the idea is they require them to, they give bonus points to contractors who pay a living wage or who do different things like that. How much do you think this is just the incentives of the industry, and how much do you think it is also maybe like there's maybe a control aspect too of not wanting workers unionized?
Well, you know, again, in many ways, the gig economy is, as I said, started misclassification. The whole notion, the other sort of trendy term of sectoral bargaining is something that existed for years with prevailing wage in construction. Prevailing wage is it sets a floor for wages for public procurement, any publicly funded project in those states that have it, or any federal project. So there's a long history in construction of this kind of these sort of tags attached to public construction in terms of the floor. So what you're now seeing is through responsible contracting, wage theft ordinances, either at the state or municipal level, is what you're talking about is kind of additional requirements that are part of either public or even private. I mean, it's much more difficult to impose those conditions on private construction. But like, you know, I'm in Boston, and the town of Somerville, which is a neighboring community, last year passed a wage theft ordinance that not only insisted that all municipal construction be prevailing wage and that workers be employees, not independent contractors, with the appropriate workers' compensation, but they actually also included joint employment liability. So the generals were responsible, and included a sign-in, sign-out sheet log, which may not sound all that innovative, but in fact, that captures people who are these invisible workers who don't show up on payroll records. But so, yes, that's a long answer to your question. That this is a way of, I think, establishing minimum floors to make sure that we don't have a race to the bottom in the industry, which we unfortunately do in many states already.
Thank you.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question about like how we can predict or understand things moving forward. Probably it's not an answer that we can find. Probably this is not like a discussion of the solution, but I just want to hear your insight on this. So I was by the very impressive presentation, really enjoyed it. I was very surprised when I read from the literature, actually the construction industry as a whole has been characterized by declining wages and increasing unemployment, very early retirement age. I was very surprised because if we think about other occupations, varying level progress have been made. Then at the same time, something that we have been discussing a lot at the LERA meeting was about the change of technologies. I think many of us know that in construction, in manufacturing, there were some new technologies that are being used. I think I have heard from some other colleagues at Rutgers, for example, the building imaging and virtual reality, etc. So there are opportunities that some people believe that we can make use of those technology to enhance the ability for construction workers, including carpenters, to instead of being replaced, it will make part of the human work more valuable because productivity will increase when human and machine can work together. But when we have those discussions, we often find it very difficult because of the focus of your study here, gig workers, and the types of the job is so fragmented. workers do not have the resources or the motivation to invest in the skill in buying those high level or high pricey tools and expect that they are able to benefit from those tools and equipment over a long period of time. So that's where I stuck. I wonder whether you have more optimistic thoughts about this.
Well, I think I've advanced the average age of this panel by probably a factor of I don't know how much, but so I've seen a lot of this stuff in the past. So let's talk two things. Automation. Construction has always historically been sort of made fun of as being the industry that is the least. I mean, I worked in the industry and I used tools that carpenters used 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And that's still true today. However, and you're not going to see robots on construction sites anytime soon. And you're not going to see factories in Bangladesh making buildings and dropping them on a foundation in New York. So and it's a very decentralized industry. So there's not much incentive for contractors to spend a lot of money on automation because the return on investment. It's one thing for General Motors to automate. You know, they don't care. They'll get their investment in 10 years. They don't care. But contractors are worried about Monday and the next week and don't have the luxury of that kind of cash flow to make that investment. So what you are seeing is what you described as modeling, which is there's this technology that's called BIM, Building Information Modeling, that now brings people together and actually builds a building twice. It brings all the architects, the engineers, the tradespeople, the contractors, and they all meet and they go through all of the designs and all the problems that might come up, and they model a building from beginning to end, and then they go out and they actually build it with the hands and tools. So that has made that is making the industry more productive and more efficient. With regard to your earlier point, on a personal level, I find it very discouraging to have seen what I considered a once wonderful industry that allowed people opportunities to be so degraded. But again, it's completely bifurcated. In Boston's a strong union town. The unions are very strong. You can make a great career as a carpenter, electrician, plumber, whatever. But if you go to Texas and you're asking a carpenter to work for $15 an hour with no benefits, and say move around concrete forms that weigh 60, 70 pounds in 100-degree weather outside to build a shopping mall, once that mall is built, the person who's selling the t-shirts in the Gap store in an air-conditioned environment is also getting $15 an hour. They wonder why there are labor shortages. And the answer is simple. They've degraded the compensation and the conditions so severely that it's not an attractive industry, except for immigrant workers who, this is still an upgrade. So that's why the industry has become so much dominated in certain parts of the country by immigrants, and particularly undocumented immigrants.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights. Really helpful here.
Thank you. I think time is running out. So thank you so much for sharing your work. And I've learned a lot and fantastic work, and I see potentials and insights in them. So best of luck on your project. And I hope to see you in person next year or so. I'll see you around. And please feel free to share any questions and feedback through emails. Okay, thank you so much. It's great work.